Hi everyone, this is Ravi. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in this session, I'm going to teach you how can we perform API automation by using Katalon tool and how can we perform API automation by using TestProject tool. So basically I'm going to explain you step by step the API automation by using TestProject first and then step-by-step process of API automation by using Katalon. Please do subscribe to the channel, click on bell icon. You'll receive notifications whenever I publish more videos on these concepts. So now let's jump onto the system and see how can we perform API automation by using TestProject first. Okay, after that I am going to teach you how can we perform API automation by using Katalon. Okay, let's jump on to TestProject. Okay, so following are the agenda items for today's session. I'm going to teach you how can we install RESTful API client from add-ons module within the TestProject automation tool. Okay, and also I'm going to teach you how can we add different actions to send HTTP or HTTPS requests using get, post, put and delete methods for REST services. And also I will teach you how can we capture the server response for any request, JSON request that you sent, right? And also I'm going to teach you how can we capture the response codes. Okay, and also I'm going to teach you how can we extract multiple JSON paths and then store those multiple JSON paths in parameters. So what is JSON path? The JSON path is, so generally the JSON structure, you'll have a root elements and then child elements, right? So in JSON paths, by using JSON path, you can capture any root element or any child element that you want to validate. So you can extract any child element that you want to validate and then store it into parameters so that you can use those stored parameters against your expected results, or you can use them in your upcoming test cases, right? So while automating one test case, you can capture the output response and you can capture the elements and you can use those elements from the response in another test case. So I'm going to teach you that. And also I'm going to teach you how can we validate the JSON elements using parameters. Okay. So if you have, let's jump on to our system. Let me jump onto the system, show you all these concepts and techniques. How can we perform by using TestProject? How can we validate end-to-end API by using TestProject? Okay, so now let's practically do automation step by step by using TestProject. Okay, so before we start, I just want to show you what I'm going to automate. Okay, so this is one sample website where we have a different types of REST requests. Okay, in this first request is getting list of all users from the system. Okay, so here I want to automate. Whenever I send this request, I have to get a response of 200 and I have to get a response of all these users, right? As a response, all these users. Okay, and I want to capture the user details of my first record, not all the records, but I want to capture separately the user details of first record, and I want to capture the first name and last name and keep it stored. Okay, and now when I go to single user request, in the single user request I have to pass the ID. So if you see, my first user ID is 7. So if I pass the first user ID in the request, I should get the response of my ID 7, which is first name Michael and Lawson, right? So now because in the first request I'm storing my first name and last name. In the second request, when I send a single user request, I should get the same first name and last name which I captured in my previous request, right? In the previous request, output JSON will have the first name and last name. This output JSON, I'm going to store first name and last name and ID. I'm going to store in parameters, and I want to use these parameters to automate the second request. Okay. And also I'm going to create, so basically I want to create a user by using post method. I want to create this user, right? As soon as I create a user will be created with unique ID, right? Now I want to capture this unique ID so that I can use this unique ID to delete the user. So without capturing the unique ID, you cannot delete the user, right? So whenever I post a new user will have his new unique ID. Now from the response, I will capture this and I want to use this in the next test case to delete the record. So these are all the scenarios that we are going to automate. Okay. So for that, let's go back to test project. So let me create a new folder. Oh, I already created a new folder called a YouTube demo API. Okay. So I would suggest you guys to basically visit my previous videos to create folders and projects and how can you create test, right? All these things I have already I have already explained in my previous 7 YouTube videos. Please do visit that, okay, before you proceed with this. Now let's create a new test, okay? And here select web. I want to select web here and name this as sample API test. Okay, click on next, and I want to add, I think I already have application. Let's see. So this is our application, rest request rest.in, right? Okay, so that I already have actually API test where I have already stored that URL. Okay, this is the URL. Okay, and then click on next and click record. So as soon as you click record, it's gonna open that URL. Okay, start recording. So why I'm adding URL, just for it's easy for us to understand what we are automating. Okay, so in today's session, this is what I'm going to cover. So in the upcoming session, I'm going to enhance it, the concepts again. I'm going to enhance the concepts. I'm going to teach you a little advanced concepts. Okay, so whenever you started the recording, immediately it's going to start the URL and it opens the URL. Okay, so what is our first test that you want to automate? Okay, we want to automate the first request where we'll be getting all the users as a response, right? Okay, let me show you that. Okay, so it's basically loading. Just give a minute. Okay, let me pause the recording and show you. Okay, so here my first request is this. Okay, so let's add a new step manually. Add step manually. What are we doing here? We are doing get function, right? So basically, before you add this step manually, let's go back to test project. Okay, what is our prerequisite? Go to add-ons and search for RESTful. Just search for RESTful. Here, as soon as you search for RESTful, you will get an add-on called RESTful API client. And then you will have install button here. Because I already installed, it's showing me install. If you're not installed, it's going to show you install. Just click on install button. It will take a minute to install this add-on. Okay, that's our prerequisite. Okay, so now let's go back to our test again. Okay, so because I already added that add-on, So now click on add step manually. Here you just type http get, because I have installed that add-on. I will get this action, http get request. Okay, click on this. So as soon as you click on here, it will ask you to provide the URI. Okay, what is my URL? Rest in rest sorry request rest.in slash what is my source. This is my source for to get all the list of users, right? Just enter that API slash users page equal to 2. Okay, this is my URL. And now JSON path. So for now, leave about the JSON path. Okay, what is my expected status? My expected status is 200, correct? So let's enter expected status as 200, which is response code. Okay, now let's capture the entire response. Okay, so how can you capture the entire response? Go to your server response body. Okay, now select a parameter. Now I want to add a new parameter here. What is the parameter I want to add? Server response. Okay, so basically what I am doing, I'm adding a parameter so that I can capture the response. Okay, select this server response. Okay, so now what I am doing, entire server response, basically this entire response, the whatever the response we are seeing here is going to store in a parameter called server response. Okay, let's save this step. Now let's execute and see what happens. Okay, let's execute this. So it's executed successfully, and see the details here. If you see the details, the response code is 200, which is correct. And what is my response body? This entire server response is this. So that means I have stored the entire server response to the parameter successfully, right? That is done. Now, as I told you, from this entire response, I have to extract the details of my first user only, correct? For that, you need to add another step manually. Type extract JSON path, extract JSON. So if you see here, yeah, extract multiple JSON paths. So because this is also a separate add-on. So as soon as you search in the action, you might not have a option to add, because you need to install. So you will have a button called install. So you need to install this JSON operation. Okay, add-on. This is add-on. So as soon as you click on install, you should be able to use this function. Okay, so select that function. Now I want to capture. So what is my this entire JSON value that I want to use to extract multiple JSON paths? So you need to provide the entire response, whatever we captured in our first step. Okay, just go here. Okay, so here earlier we already captured in our first step entire response. So I want to use this parameter here. Okay, server response. Take the server response. Now what are all the JSON paths? So you can basically specify multiple JSON paths in different lines. Okay, my first JSON path is I want to extract first name and last name. Okay, so to extract, so basically how to extract the first name last name, probably you can refer. So anytime you extract, or even anytime you specify a particular child element, so you need to start with dollar. Okay, dollar dot. So basically let me take directly all these things here. Okay, so if you see here, let me copy all these things. Okay, what I'm doing, I'm capturing. So if you see here, what I'm doing, let me save this and explain you, okay, why I have entered like this. Okay, if you go here, my response, the response is stored in a root element called data. Under root element data, so basically first root element is page. Okay, I'll be using dot, and then second root element is data. Under data, what is next one? I want to capture first name as a child element, which is Michael. I want to capture last name, and I want to capture ID. And hence, that's why if you see here, dollar dot, this represents your page first root element, and the second root element data, because this entire users details are reside under data. So that's why I'm entering data. And what is my first element? Because here every element starts with 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Every user within the data, this is my first 0 element. This is my 1 sub element, 2, 3. So now I want my first one, which is 0. Under data, I want first element. What I want? I want first name. That's why I'm specifying 0 dot first name. In the same way, dollar dot data 0 and last element, dollar dot data 0 and ID. Okay. So now I'm capturing all these JSON paths. I'm extracting basically. Once I extract, I want to store them in parameters. What is my output? So, okay, first path result 1. What in my first path is first name, correct? So let's create first parameter. Add first name, save this, select it. So that means first name is gonna, my first path is gonna store in this parameter. What is my second one? Second one is last name. Add another parameter, last name. That means my second path, whatever I'm extracting, is going to store here. Second path is last name. Third path is ID. So just add a third one, right? Add another parameter called ID. Save this. So that my third path is going to store here. Done. I think that's it. And then save the step. So that means first I'm getting entire response. From entire response, I'm just extracting this first element, sub element, right? Child element. I'm extracting my first record, and I'm storing my first name, last name, and ID in different parameters. Right. Now, what is my next test case? My next test case is to execute a get operation. Okay. This is my get operation. But what user I want to get? I want to get a first user from the entire response. What is my first user? Here is my first user, right? So let's add another action here. Okay, add step manually. Now I have to use get, right? HTTP get request. Here, what is my URL now for the single user? To get the single user, this is my URL. Okay, copy this, and then this is your source, API slash users slash here ID. So I don't want to use the ID called to, but I want to use the ID that I have stored earlier. Where here, if you see, okay, we have not executed this, right? We already executed it. Let's see the extract JSON paths successfully executes or not. Okay, let me extract this. Okay, let me execute this. When I execute this, it should extract the response and store first name, last name, and ID, right? If you go here and see my first path, oh, it says it's not found. So basically, let me execute my first step again. Okay, let's execute first step. It's going to store entire response, server response. Let's execute this now. Now it's got successful. Okay, oh, it says not found. Let's see what is happening. I can see that ID, it able to find the ID, but not able to find the first name and last name. I think we have used wrong. Let's see, first name and last name. Let's see what are all the element names again. Okay, here in the response, if you see here, first underscore name. Okay, last underscore name. First underscore name, last underscore name. You can see that. Okay, let me do one thing. Okay, let me capture. Okay, I'm just checking. Current value is this per page size 12. We got total 12. Okay, what is my first name? Is this? It's able to find. Okay, let's do one thing. Let me change this for 1 1. Okay, and see what happens. Let's execute this. Still it's not able to find the first name and last name in the path, but it is able to find the ID. Okay, let's go back here. Something we are doing wrong. Okay, 0 0 first name, last name. Okay, so now let's execute this. Okay, before we proceed with the third second test case, let's execute this. Okay, where we are actually extracting the first name, last name, and your ID from your first data set. Correct? Okay, this data, first name, last name, and ID. Okay, let's execute this. Okay, so let's execute this. So if you see here, I can see that now it is getting exactly Michael Lawson and your ID as 7. If you see here, first name is Michael, last name is Lawson, and your ID is 7. Correct? It's got it. Now, what we are doing here, we are actually executing single user test case, right? But now here I want to pass, instead of 2, I want to pass the ID that I have captured from this step. I want to capture the ID that I am storing here, right? I want to use that. So for that, go here. Now modify your URL here. Okay. So the URL is API underscores API slash user slash this one, right? The 2. Instead of 2, I want to pass my ID that I captured in my previous step. So for that, use parameter and go down and select ID. Okay, use parameter, select ID. That's it. So I'm using ID here instead of hard coding my user which I want. And here, see here, now when I get the response, so let me store the response as it is, server response here. Okay, what is my server response? Just store as it is. Let's use the same server response. I want to override the server response of my previous test case. Okay, just use the server response, or let me create a new one. Unnecessary confusion. Okay, let's create single user response, right? Single user response. Save this, select it. Okay, response I'm storing here, and save the step. Now let's execute this step. Now execute. So now it should use the ID from the previous, which is 7. My previous ID is, let me show you the previous test case ID. What I got here is, however, on this, if you see, I can see the ID is stored as 7 here, and my last name is stored as Lawson. My first name is stored as Michael. Okay, so it's what it executed. Let's see. If you see here, I got, see, ID 7. I got the response, ID 7 response. I got first name Michael and last name Lawson. I want to validate the response now. Within the response, does the response contains first name, which I got from my previous test case where I have stored here, right? So let me add another step here. Okay, let's go back here again. What is the response you got? Let's see. This entire response body I got the response of only one user. Now I want to extract first name and last name from this response. Add another step manually. Same thing, extract multiple JSON paths, right? Select that. Here, what is my JSON input here? The latest response that I captured, which is single user response. Okay. And what are all the JSON paths I want to capture? I want to capture my simple first name and last name. Okay. Because currently I have only one set of data, right? Only one set of data. That's it. So I need not to use 0, 1, 2, 3 because I have only one set of data. That's why I'm going to use dollar dot dot first name, dollar dot dot last name, right? That's it. Now here I want to add a validation here. What is my first validation? So instead of storing this first name last name, I want to add a validation. Whatever the first name and last name I captured from the single user response, is it contains my first name that I have captured in my previous step. Okay, I'm asking that does contain the value that is stored in my parameter which I captured earlier, first name. So let's say another one. Another one is, does this second JSON path contains, let's add another one, does that contains last name? So basically instead of storing my JSON first JSON path and second JSON path in the variable, I'm actually adding a validation point here. Does the first JSON path whatever I'm capturing is equal to the first name that I captured in my previous step, right? In the same way last name in the I captured in previous step. Okay, just save this. If you see here, I've already captured my first name here in my previous step. First name showing as Michael, second name showing as Lawson, right? So now let's execute this and see what happens. So it's failed. What is the failure? Let's see. It says result 1. Oh, first name. It's not capturing first name. Let's close this again. Okay. What is the problem? Let's see. Open this. I want to type this again. Okay. Dollar dot dot first name, because there is a problem in copy and pasting. Dollar dot dot last name. Save this. Now execute this again. Now it's pass. If you see here, Michael Lawson. That means let's execute this entire test cases together. Okay, let's run from here. Okay, what I'm doing, I'm getting all user details here and I'm capturing my first user details from the response, and I'm storing ID, first name, last name in parameters. And in the second test case where I'm actually requesting for only one user details, where I'm using the ID from my previous test case and I'm getting the entire response of that user, and I'm actually capturing only first name and last name from the response, and I'm validating if the first name and last name or whatever I got from this request is equal to the first name last name I captured from my previous request. Okay, that's what I'm doing. Okay, let's execute all together. Run from here. So it's going to open the URL. and then it start executing my first get function. If you see here, get, and then it is extracting id, first name, last name, and then it is getting my second single username. So everything is passed. Pass, result is pass. I got the single user details, and it contains the previous first name and last name I captured in my previous use case, right? So hope you all understand the concept. It's really very important to capture the JSON paths and multiple JSON paths so that you can validate n number of elements or child elements from your responses. Okay, so here are the steps that we need to follow in automating API services by using Katalon automation tool. First, we need to set up API testing project by using the existing templates. Basically, whenever you create a project in Katalon, you can select a predefined templates for API testing. And also, we will be adding the API request in the object repository. So when it compares to web UI automation, in web UI automation, we generally add all the objects to the object repository. But in API project, while automating the test cases, we need to add API requests that you want to automate in the object repository. Okay, and also we will be creating an API test case after adding all the API requests in the object repository. And we need to add web service keywords to send the requests, to update the request, so and to perform the validations. So you will have a web service keywords in the Katalon that we will be using. And also I'm going to teach you how to use variables and also the global variables while automating the API requests. So why do we use variables and global variables? We generally use variables to store the required JSON paths. That means, let's say you sent a request, API request, and then you got the response. Within the response, if you want to capture one of the element, that means the JSON element of the entire request, then you will be capturing that element and storing that element into variable, and then you can use that variable in the next request. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how can we use these variables and global variables in performing the different types of validations. And also I'm going to teach you how to use snippets in Groovy language. That means in the object repository, whenever you add API services, you can basically add some snippets, predefined snippets, which generates a Groovy language to perform some of the basic validations within the response. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how can we use those and what are all the, how useful these snippets are. Okay, and also I'm going to teach you how can we run and validate the API request. Okay, so now let's jump onto the system and let me show you step by step how can we perform all these actions by using Katalon automation tool. Okay, so this is my Katalon studio. So if you remember, in my previous videos, I've explained you all different concepts of web UI automation, right? What are all the different techniques we use while automating the web UI, how to perform parallel testing and all these things. And then we worked on all these test scripts, right? So now, so to perform to perform API automation, so first of all, let's create a new project. Okay, so let me create. If you go to file and then go to new, instead of new project, now I would like to go for new sample request. Okay, so in this new sample request, I would like to select sample API test project. Okay, so let's click on that and name this as API automation tests. Okay, API automation. Just name this as API automation. Okay, and then click on OK. So as soon as you click on OK, it creates a sample project structure. Okay, so where it will this particular project will have a predefined structure. Okay, as you all know, profile is the common structure in web UI and API. And also if you see, there is a test case module, and under test case module I can see there are two sample test cases automatically got inserted. And then the first test case is related to the REST service, and the second test case is related to your sample SOAP service, right? And also if you see here, object repository, under object repository we have two different repositories elements. One is for the REST service and the other one is for the post service, right? Which is sorry, which is SOAP service. Okay, so first of all, let's, before explaining about these sample requests, let's create our own request. Okay, so let's close this as well. I'm just closing all the tabs, right? Okay, so now first, as I told you earlier in the slides, while automating the web UI, we generally add all the objects in the object repository. In the same way, while we automating the API services, we need to add all the services that you are automating, or all the operations that you are automating in object repository. So let's go to our, what are all the sample requests that we are automating. Okay, if you type rec-rest.in, so where you have all the sample request messages here. Okay, so if you remember correctly, while posting the videos on test project, I have explained you the same request messages while automating the API tests. So I have already explained you by using test project how can we automate the API request, right? So I'm using the same website, I'm using the same requests to automate the same services by using Katalon. Okay, so if you see here, what is my first request, which is get request, which is list of all the users. So if I click on this, it retrieves all the users, list of all the users present in the organization. Okay, if I want to retrieve a single user, so this is another get method where I'll be getting the single user details, right? And also if I want to update, which is put method, okay, where I'll be updating the name of the user and job title of the user. Okay, so we are going to work on these services. Okay, get service, post service, and then put service. Okay, so now, so how to use this, let me explain by automating the services by using Katalon. Okay, first let me automate the service get users. Okay, how can we automate this web service by using Katalon? Okay, so first here, for this you need to create a object repository and then right click on object repository and create a new web service request. Okay, so create new web service request. Before creating the service request, probably if you want to create a folder, you can create a folder. Okay, so let me create a folder, rest rec services. Okay, let's rec services. Okay, under this folder I want to create a new web service request. Okay, name this as, what is this name? List users. Okay, list users. And what is the URL? So the URL is, so if you see here, this is my request and then this is my URL. Okay, basically this is my entire URL. Okay, right, so copy this entire URL and then paste it here and click on OK. As soon as you click on OK, it's going to show you. So if you see here, this is my get method, and if you can see, it shows all the method: post, put, delete, and etc. Okay, and this is my URI for the request message, and this is my properties. If you see here, what is my property here? If you see here, if I remove this one, okay, if I remove this, see, I don't have any properties here now. Okay, but if I add this again, see the page property. The page property is this. Okay, so in API Katalon, so as soon as you enter the property, it takes the property by default here. Or I can add additional properties here as well. So if you see here, let me see, user, see, it is adding another property here. See, it added another property. Okay, so I can delete this property again. Okay, for now, because we are using this service, which is to get the list of users, so this is the property that we need to use. Okay, and if you see here, under the same page, you can see the format of your entire service request. Okay, where you can provide your authorization. If you have any authorization, you can provide the authorization. If you have a basic authorization, you can just select basic authorization and then provide username and password. And then if you have any OAuth, you can provide OAuth as well. So for now, I don't have any authorization, so I'm going to select no authorization. And this is your HTML header, and this is your HTML body, right? So HTML body, currently we don't have any HTML body. So if I want to use update service, then I will have a HTML body here. Okay, so because currently I don't have any HTML body, I need not to provide any HTML body for the list users. Okay, and here, and also if you see verification, so I'm going to explain this verification tab while automating the service. Okay, and how can we use variables, I'm going to explain in this session, right? And then if you see here, I think, yeah, and also, okay, let me execute this command for now. Okay, let me execute this. I'm sending the request. Test the request. As soon as you click on, so it will ask you to save the request, basically save the changes. As soon as you save the changes, so it is sending the request now. It is sending the request. It's going to get the response. So if you see here, this is my response. So as soon as you get the response, if you want to see the response in the raw format, you can see in the raw format. If you want to see in pretty format, you can see in the pretty format. And also, if the response is in JSON format, you can select the JSON. If you want to see in HTML, you can select in HTML. And also you have XML. And also you have HTML response, HTML, JSON, JavaScript, and all these things. Because currently we are using JSON request, so I'm going to select as JSON. So we have executed. Let me execute this again. We have executed this. I got the response of all the users here, right? I got the response of all the users. So this is done. And now what is my status? The status response is 200K, correct? But here we just added the service. I'm not performing any validations. How can we perform validation whether the response is correct or not, whether the status code is correct or not, right? We need to add the test cases, because we just added the service under object repository. Now to validate or to automate a test case, you need to create a new test case. Okay, for that, right click on this, click on new, and then let me create a folder, rest smoke test. So this is my new folder under test cases. Let me create a new test case. So my new test case name is list users test. Click OK. So as soon as you click OK, it's going to open an empty test case template. Okay, if you see here, when we are actually creating a test cases for web UI, you used to get this here, add web UI keyword. But now if you see, by default it says add web service keyword, or you can use this add button to call a different keywords, web UI keyword, mobile keyword, web service keyword, whatever. But this is my web service. That's the reason I want to use add web service keyword. And also you can get the keywords from this keyword browser, right? Built-in keywords, same thing, web UI, mobile, web services, and all these things. Okay, now let's go back to test case again. So now let me add a new web service keyword. As soon as you click on this, so what do you want? I want to send a request first, correct? So what is the request? So if you see here, I can double click on this. Just now I created a repository called REST request services, right? I'm expanding this folder. This is my new object that I want to add, right? Under from the object repository. Select this service and then click on OK. So that means I'm sending a request of list users. Okay. And now what is my output? I want to store this output in a variable called response users. Okay. This is my response users. I'm basically storing the response of this particular request under a variable called response users. Okay. So now, and then let me add a new keyword here and add verify element property value. I want to verify the element property value of this response. That means, let me show you. So this is my element property value, right? These are all okay. So before I validate the element property value, let me see if the response is 200 or not. Okay, for that, what I want to do, instead of element property value keyword, I would like to use verify status. Okay, let me do one thing. Okay, get response status code or verify response status code. I want to verify the response status code. Select this. What is my response status code? First of all, what is my value type? That means what is my response object? I'm storing the response object under variable called response users, right? So I need to select this as a variable here. Okay, this is my variable. What is the value type is variable, and what is the value here, which is response users is the value. And what is your expected status code? My expected status code is 200. And then stop on failure. That's okay. Let me keep it. So if you want to stop on the failure, you can stop on the failure. If you want to continue on the failure, you can continue on the failure. Or if you want to go for the optional, you can go for the optional. So these concepts I have already explained you while automating web UI application. Okay, you can. So same thing here as well. Okay, click on OK. And now I'm verifying the response. So let me execute this test case first. Okay, click on run. As soon as you click on run, so it's going to run, it's going to send the request first, and then it's going to validate the response code. So it's running. So if you see here, it is sending the request, and then it's going to validate the response. So this test case is passed. If you see here, it sends the request. I got the request successfully sent, and then what is my response, which is 200, right? And the status response code is successful. Verified the status response code successfully. That means it's got passed. And now, what if I want to validate one of the element here? So let me validate one of the element called Michael. So that means I want to see if my under data users details, first user detail, my first user first name is Michael. I want to validate this whether the response has the first user first name as Michael or not. For that, first, what is the element? What is the JSON path? How can I get the JSON path of this element? For that, Control A, copy. I'm copying the response. So let's go to your website and see JSON path finder. Okay, search on JSON path finder. Open the JSON path finder and paste your response message here. If you see here, as soon as you paste the response, if you see, if you expand the data, see under data parent element, you have all the usernames, right? Under data, what is my zero? First, zero means my first user. So total I have 5 users. What is my first user? This is my first user. So if I click on this first name Michael, it's going to give you the JSON path. Okay, it's simple. So you need not to research more on that. But see, if you want to see how can I write the JSON paths and all these things, I have explained this while automating the web services by using TestProject. So I would suggest you guys to visit those videos if you want to understand more towards the JSON paths and elements within the JSON format. Okay, so this is my JSON path. Okay, copy this JSON path, just keep this here. Okay, let's keep this here. Okay, let's go back to Katalon, and now I want to open my test case again. Okay, so this is my test case. So now I have validated the response 200 successfully, right? Now I want to validate my response element here, first name response. Under first name, whether the Michael is coming or not. Okay, so for that, let's go back to test case, add a new web service keyword. What is this web service I want to, what is the keyword? Verify element property value. Okay, verify element property value. What is the property value? Okay, just open this. If you see here, because I'm storing the response under response users, what is your response object? My variable. Response object is variable. And what is the variable? So my variable is same thing. Sorry, not this one. My variable is response users, right? And what is the locator? So locator nothing but this is my locator which I want to validate, right? So this is my locator, which is data, under data first element, which is 0. Okay, double click this, sorry, click on this and then provide here. Okay, this is the locator, and what is the value that you are expecting? I'm expecting the value of Michael, correct? So copy this Michael, value of Michael. So let me add the value here. Okay, let's click on this. Okay, let me open this again. So value is, what is the value, which is a string. Okay, I'm expecting string, and value is Michael. Click on OK. Okay, so now what are the steps that we added? Send the request and then validate the response code of 200. While sending the request, we stored our response under output, and I'm validating with the first element locator, whether that first element locator first name has Michael in it or not. Okay, click on OK. So now let's execute this. So as soon as we click on execute, so it's going to send the request. So if you see here, I can see that the request is sent successfully. 200 is the response code, and what is the element value? The element value is Michael. So if you see here, the data has a Michael as an element value. It's successfully passed, right? And now, so let me create a test suite. So let me create a test suite. Test suite rec smoke suite. Just name this as smoke suite. Click on OK. And then add the test case here. Expand this. Either you can click on the folder or you can just click on your test case. Click OK. And then you can directly execute your suite here. Execute this. So as soon as you execute, it's gonna send the request first and then capture the response and validates the status code 200 and then validates the element property as well. So the locator. which is first name Michael. So if you see here, so these are all the test cases are passed. If I expand this, this is my response element first name Michael, right? So now, and also you can see the reports here. If you expand the reports, and under same suit, I have the report here. Double click on this. It's same the report. The same report is same as the web UI automation. Okay. So this is the summary and pass, fail, right? If you want to see show test case details, you can just expand this. Okay, which shows the test case details. Okay. And now hide these test case details. Let me go back to test case again. So what you understand here is we are gonna add the objects, sorry, under object repository, we generally add the request messages, whatever you want to send. So let me also do another request message. Okay, let me automate another request, which is single user. Okay, let's use this single user. So what is the URL of the single user? Okay, let me just refresh this. This is my single user. The URL of single user is this one, right? Copy and just paste it here. Okay, this is my URL. So if you see, as soon as I execute this, I should get Janet, means I'm using the user 2. Okay, let me copy this. Let's add web service keyword. So before adding the web service keyword, I need to add this new service, which is single user service under object repository. Right click on the object repository, click on new, and then new web service request, which is single user, right? And what is the URL? This is my URL. Click OK. Yeah, so if you see, because currently I don't have any properties, because if I add any property here, it automatically adds the property. See, earlier we added. So but in this case we don't have any property. Okay, so let's execute this service and see. As soon as I execute, so it's going to ask you to save. I should get the response of second user. If you see, a second user is Janet. What about the third user? Let's get the third user response. Third user is your Emma, correct? So let me keep this as second user and save this. Right, so we added the service here. Now let's go back to test case. Now let me automate that particular service as well. Add the web service. Sorry, so let me move down. So I added here, you can move down this step as well. So okay, so now what is the object? So either you can just double click on this and then add the object from here, or there is another way of adding the object. Okay, what is the way? You just single user, this is the new service, right? Drag and drop the single user here. That's it. So this is the object I want to add, and then I want to store the response here. Okay, what is the response? Let me store the response as single user response. Okay, single user response. And now I want to verify the status code. What is the status code that we are getting here? So that is status code is 200, right? Let add your status code. Add keyword, verify response status code, right? What is the status code here? What is your object? First of all, the response object is single user response, right? Variable, under variable, single user response, single user response. Done. And then expected status is 200. Click OK. Right? Now let's, before execution, I want to see what if the test case is fails. Let me do one thing. Let me, instead of 200, let me put this as 201. Okay, and see what happens. Okay, now let's save these changes and then execute this. So as soon as I click on execution, it's going to first execute my first test case, list of all users, and then it's going to validate the status and the data element, and then single user, and then the status. So if you see here, the last test step should be failed. So if you see, my test case is failed. Why? If you see, the fifth step is failed. If you expand this, it's going to clearly mention expected status code is, the expected status code is 201, but the actual status code is 200. So now let me just change this to 200. Click OK. So let me execute this. Save this. Execute these two test cases. So now it should, all the steps should be passed. The first test case is getting executed, done. The second test case is also executed, done. So that means if you see, all 5 steps got passed. So let's go back to our test suite again now. Now I want to add the second test case as well. Add here, expand this. Okay, so 1 minute. Okay, save these changes. Oh, sorry. So test case, what I did is actually I created the same test case. In the same test case, I have added all the steps. So list users test is the one test case, right? This is our one test case. So if you want to divide this as another test case, you can group this as another test case instead of a new test case. Okay. So hope you all understand, right? These are the very basic, very basic concepts of automating the web services. Now in the upcoming session, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to teach you how can I store. So let's say I have this response here. Okay. Under this, when I'm getting the list of users, I want to store the output, one of the element, JSON path element in one variable. And then while sending the next request, I want to use that another, the stored variable in another request. That means if you see here, let me go back to here. In the first test case, whatever the response I get, under the response, I'm going to store the element in a variable. And then while sending the second request, I'm going to use that variable in the request message. Okay. So now I'm going to explain how can I use the variables and how can I store the variables in a global variable, and then how can I send the global variables while sending the request. So while sending this request, I can use the variables. Okay. So how can I use those variables? And also if you see here under request messages, if you see here, I have another tab called verification. Under this verification, we have the snippets. So if you see, these are all the snippets we have, right? How can we use these snippets? And how can we perform verification within the service itself? Okay, I'm going to explain all these concepts in the upcoming session. It's really very important session, guys. Upcoming session. So please do subscribe to the channel, click on bell icon. You'll receive notifications whenever I publish more videos on these concepts. Thank you.